Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Adoption Happy Hour brought to you by NAAP. We are the National Association of Adoptees and Parents, where it is our mission to unify the adoption community and elevate our diverse voices by promoting dialogue, understanding, and healing through education, awareness, and connections. I'm Marcie Keithley, your host for the evening, along with Beth Story and Jen Falsing in the Zoom room. I think Jen's going to make a little early disappearance this evening, aren't you, Jen?
Yeah,
But
got to go decorate a float for the Veterans Day parade tomorrow. So
okay. So anyway, what we would like to do is, if you haven't already, please feel free to use the chat room and show Karlos the love by letting him know where you're at right now and how you identify in the constellation. And Beth, whenever you're ready, I am. We like to remind everyone this is a public meeting with no guarantee that information or identity is confidential. Portions of this event are recorded and may be shared in our private Happy Hour group on Facebook and shared on our YouTube channel. If you don't follow us on Facebook, Adoption Happy Hour, please do so. That's where Karlos' replay will be listed. Please remain on mute, raise your hand on screen or the virtual hand to be recognized. You may post your questions or comments in the chat. If you are experiencing a serious mental health event or suicidal thought, please contact a licensed professional or the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline by dialing 988. What else we got, Beth?
Okay, here real quick, we want to talk about our other programs. Most of you are aware we have happy hour twice a month, the first and the third Friday night. We have two other programs. Dr. Joyce's Putting Yourself Together After Reunion meets on a Tuesday night, most often the second Tuesday. And in November, it will be November 12th. And all things reunion gets talked about and explored, and she is fabulous at helping us navigate the complexities there. And then we also have First Families Birth Parents Journeying Together, facilitated by Amy Seek. They meet the second Thursday of the month, and that will be November 14th this month. So you will want to participate in either of those, as well as being here tonight for happy hour and getting ready for our next happy hour coming up. So that is all for me.
Jen, you have any announcements before we move forward? Nope. We'll be good to go. Okay. Well, at this time, it's my great pleasure to welcome Karlos Dillard to Happy Hour. Karlos, hello.
Hello, how are you guys? How is everyone?
We're great, and we're so excited to have you on finally. I know we met briefly in Denver at Untangling, and I know you are the TikTok super rock star, and you've got some amazing things to share with us. So we're just excited to have you. Before I open it up and turn this over to you, I'd like to share a little bit, well, actually, a lot about Karlos. So stay with me.
Thank you.
Karlos Dillard is a published author and social media foster care advocate. He is a transracial adoptee who was adopted from the Michigan State foster care system at the age of 9. He has a social media platform that is focused on providing accessible, diverse, and ethical adoption and foster care education. Formerly, Karlos was a commercial actor working for companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Mercedes-Benz, and many more. He has led training for foster families and adoption agencies on transracial adoption, adoption trauma, and financial literacy for foster youth. He has he's partnered with organizations like Treehouse for Kids in Seattle, Washington, using his large social media platform to fundraise over $10,000 worth of toiletries, backpacks, and suitcases for foster youth. He was also the keynote speaker for Treehouse for Kids Annual Champions Luncheon in 2022. He is a frequent speaker in many different settings, including colleges, adoption agencies, and conferences. His latest being the keynote, oh boy, sorry about that, speaker for Delaware State DSCYF Destined for Greatness Annual Graduation Ceremony. He has used his story of being a foster youth and an adoptee growing up in a white world to curate deep conversations about race in America. With his unique insight on racial tensions between the white and Black communities, he has been able to curate impactful conversations online and off, where everyone learns to value each other and their experience, while learning about systemic racism, privilege, and their role in it. Karlos wrote an engaging memoir, Wards of the State, a memoir of foster care, which is about his lived experience in the Michigan State foster care system, surviving more than 30 placements. He is a phenomenal speaker and always shines a light on the dark truths of the foster care and adoption systems. Welcome, Karlos, to Adoption Happy Hour.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I want to start off by just saying, I want to let everybody know, as you all know, it's November, so it's Adoption Awareness Month. And I believe that today is Adoptee Remembrance Day. So I just wanted to just give a second of silence for all the adoptees who haven't been able to make it with us through their process of adoption. So if we can just take a couple of seconds just for silence for them, just so they know that their voices are still heard and their light still shines. Awesome, and thank you guys for that again. Alrighty, so where do you want me to start?
Okay, so let's start.
Oh, Marcie froze.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there she's back. I was going to take it. Yeah.
One frozen.
already we're freezing. Yeah, let's start off with a little bit of backstory, Karlos. Tell us a little bit about how Karlos came into the world.
Awesome. So I was born in the inner city of Detroit in the early 90s. I was born to a mother of 4 children, a mother who had 4 children. I was the youngest of 4. I mean, there's not really much to develop more of that story, just besides the fact that um, my mom didn't have access to the resources that she could have had. A lot of people think that a lot of parents who their children get removed for neglect are neglectful, but a lot of the times they're just impoverished, right? We see a lot of parents, especially a lot of young parents, who, if given the correct opportunities to have access to resources, would have made different decisions. And that's kind of what happened in my case. My mom was also a child of the system. So, we see this cycle, especially with the foster and the adoption systems. We see it's secular. We see it happening to generation after generation. Unfortunately, when I was 7 years old, we were removed by the state of Michigan and placed in even worse scenarios in most of the foster homes. Like you said earlier, I did publish a book about my experience in foster care. So I won't go into heavy detail there. I can just say that I was in 37 different placements. And within those placements, there was a lot of trauma. There was a lot of, but even with the trauma, I had a few that were great foster parents. I had like maybe 2 or 3 good foster parents that I did learn a lot from, where I was then transracially adopted when I was around 10, I think. 10. I didn't dealt with a lot of, transracial adoption trauma, racial trauma, identity issues. I was the only person in my team. And then unfortunately, after enduring rebirth, that kind of is where my adult story starts. So that's kind of like my story in a quick nutshell.
Yeah, and so tell us. So okay, so we know a little bit about your backstory. I mean, 37 placements. I don't even know how to address this. I don't. God,
I mean,
love you.
honestly, that's not very many compared to some of the cases that I see. I was just helping a family with their foster youth who they are trying to adopt, and he's on number 48, right? So in the 90s, it was a lot. But if you see now is actually not. We see a lot of kids going through dozens and
Really?
20 to 30 foster homes,
Wow.
depending on where they are. Also, we see a lot of children who don't even make it to foster homes. They're just sitting in they're sitting in the CPS centers. And they were like, I've been in 3 different offices. I've been living in 3 different offices. I'm like, wow, I can say, wow, 37 homes is a lot. But you have to remember, they had access to place me in 37 homes. Some of these kids don't even have the option to even go to homes, and they're even in more danger staying in CPS offices and in hotels. So even though that's a lot, that's a large number, at least there were homes for me, you know?
And so, as you shared, you experienced a lot of trauma during the years. What shifted in you? What was that one defining moment that brought you to move forward in light and positivity and I want to help others? It was
Yeah, so nothing really shifted. I've always been this way. Um, I think the only thing that has happened is that I've been able to become an adult and be the adult that I needed or I wish I had when I was a kid. I've always been outspoken. That's why I had so many foster homes. Not all of them were abusive. Some of them were just because I was a very outspoken child. I was very strong-headed, strong-willed. And when you are in foster care, sometimes they just kind of want you to form and do what they want you to do and follow their rules. And as a child, yes, you do need to follow rules, but also as an abused child, I didn't understand why they didn't give me what I felt I needed, and there was never communications of like boundaries. So I think there's nothing different for me when I was a child, or no less positivity. I was always a positive. And it's just that I've just learned how to navigate my boundaries and place them. And that just came with age, honestly, age and having access to therapy.
and your writing. Let's talk about that a little bit. So you've got your first published works. How did that come about? How long did it take you?
So yeah, I've been writing since I was around 18. At first, it just started off as like a long journal, and I wanted to just have like a living journal. And I had been writing through college, just here and there, not very seriously. When I was 25, I had found the file, the zip there back in the day, y'all, before we had a cloud, we had to have these little things called hard drives. Uh, I found the little hard drive that it was on, and I was like, oh, what's this? And I started looking, I was like, oh, wait, this is like my old journal. This would be great to form into some sort of a memoir. So I started looking at that when I was around 25, seriously. And I published it about 2 years later, in 2020, after developing already what I had and adding on to it. I just finished my second book, which is called Ward of the State, Abort the Adoption. And it's not that it's so much better, but there's so much more depth to it, because when I was writing my first book, I was just like, most of it was a journal. It was just kind of telling my story. With the second book, I'm obviously older. I'm going through my adoption, but also now I have the lived experience of being a child welfare advocate and working with other families. So it is still a memoir, but I think the second book will definitely help adoptive parents kind of see where my parents went wrong, because even though I'm telling the story, it's very clear when I'm reading like where they went wrong. First step is rebirthing therapy. I don't care if an agency, and I don't know if you guys know, well, I'll just go over rebirthing therapy just for people who may not know what rebirthing therapy is. It's also called the Evergreen model. It's also called breathwork therapy. And essentially it's where they kind of like wrap you up in blankets and they suffocate you, and they try to have you not breathe for as long as you can to kind of break you down. It's meant to help kids with reactive attachment disorder attach better, which I'm not a psychiatrist or a therapist. I did speak to the National Association of Child Psychiatry and Adolescent Psychiatry 2 weeks ago in Seattle, at a conference, and everyone was like, Carlos, like it was crazy when it was happening 20 years ago, and we're so upset that kids actually have had an experience of this. And the reason why I was speaking to them about that is because it's so hard to remember that children aren't children forever, right? We all know that, but we don't understand that the effects of adoption trauma and foster care trauma and the therapies that we place children in can have a lifelong effect on how they trust these different therapists and organizations, right? So for a long part of my career, you guys probably know this. I know Jennifer probably knows this. I spoke to you about it when I was in Colorado. I didn't do these types of things, working with organizations, working with potential adoptive parents or organizations that were uplifting, because I didn't trust, right? It took me so long to trust just people in general, not only doctors, organizations, agencies, because in my experience, none of these organizations or agencies were actually there for the children. But now as an adult, you see, it's kind of like hindsight's 2020. When I have all of my cases now that I help, I'm like, okay, there are places and spaces for organizations and agencies. They just sometimes needs, what's missing is the lived experience. I think that that's the number one thing that's missing in most organizations and agencies is someone who actually has lived it and combined with the people who are currently working in the system. So I think that, yeah, the rebirthing therapy was something that really, really up until recently, really affected my life. But after speaking to so many psychiatrists and hearing how my experience will help them change their practice, that's really been healing for me as well. So I'm glad that I did do it. But yeah, it was very interesting.
Yeah, that's the thing about when you go to, you have you keynote, you have a speaking engagement, and you're able to touch those professionals and change the mindset, open up the heart, and we really need to dissect this thing and not just look at it on the surface.
Absolutely. And going back to your original question of like, how do you continue to shine light and stay positive? I want to remind people that we don't need to shine light or stay positive. People who've struggled through adoption in the foster care system, they can just be who they are, which is just a survivor. Um, I hear it a lot, and I heard it at that conference as well. How did you survive? How are you doing so well? Am I right? You ask the strongest person, like, how did you survive? Those are the people that you should be looking at. The people who aren't here today, like I opened the talk up with Adoption and Remembrance Day, those are the people that we should be speaking to. Those are the people that we should have heard when we had the opportunity to hear them. So don't just listen to people who can sit up here and speak articulately and have a happy face and a happy smile like I can. Listen to the ones who don't communicate like me as well. Listen to the ones who, quote, might be angry. Listen to the adoptees or foster youth who may not communicate in the same fashion as I do. Because that's the reality of it. This is just my personality, right? I was just born to be a speaker, no matter if I went through foster care or not. I was going to be a speaker. Um, it just happens that I speak on my lived experience. Had I been born to a nice family, I probably would have ended up being a politician or something. Right. But it's just it's just naturally what I'm good at. And I don't want people to think that there's some type of code or trick. There isn't. It's nature versus nurture. And a lot of the time it's just who you are.
And also, too, we all come with different strengths and weaknesses. We come with different talents. Some people are able to grab that microphone and get on stage, and others express it in music or poetry or painting or whatever it is. We can't discount anyone's the way that they process and strive to do more than thrive. Correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you for that. The next thing I want to talk about, tell us some more about Treehouse. That's really how did that form, the Treehouse and raising
Yeah,
from.
so I lived in Seattle, Washington. One thing about being a foster youth is that there is one positive, and especially I tell foster youth who are aging out now, one positive of not having family is that you don't have a family. You aren't locked down anywhere. One thing that my husband and I do every 5 to 7 years, we roll a die and we write down 6 cities, and then we go move to that city without even ever being there. We do this about every we've done it 3 times now, the last 15 years we've been together. So the way I ended up in Seattle was literally the roll of the die. I went to college in Florida. It had been about 5 years since college. So we wrote down 5 or 6 cities, rolled a die. It said Seattle. We packed our car. We go move to Seattle. Um, when I lived in Seattle, I had this big dream because I saw that there's a lot of movies. A lot of people don't know this, but a lot of movies are filmed in Seattle and in Portland. So you see like celebrities and famous people all the time. And I was like, oh, I want to do that. I always wanted to be like kind of behind the camera. So I got an agent. Um, I started doing commercial work. I got really good at commercial work. One of the benefits of being a Black actor in Seattle is that there aren't that many Black actors in Seattle specifically. So whenever they had a person who needed to be like a Black casting, I was almost always picked. So that led me to quitting my full-time job. I worked in corporate America full-time. I quit my full-time job after I think like my second or third gig, that was a big gig. So I took a risk. I was like, I'm just going to do this acting thing. I was doing this acting thing, doing well, as you said in my intro, worked for Mercedes, Amazon. Like at the top of my goal was to be Flo from Progressive, the actress. Flo makes a lot of money and doesn't do anything else but like a couple commercials a year. I wanted that gig. That's a good gig, right? You can make $5 to $6 million a year working for one company and just making a couple videos. I wanted to be Flo. But unfortunately, COVID happened. As we all know, everything shut down. So when COVID happened, everything shut down. And that's when I started creating my TikTok. And I started telling my story on TikTok. And one of the things that I learned as I started sharing my story was listening to current adoptees and foster youth, especially during COVID. At that time, we had mask issues. There was not enough toilet paper, just the things that normal people that we were struggling with. Can you imagine the access to these things that foster youth lacked? So foster youth did not have access to toilet paper, tissue, feminine products was huge. So I saw this need. And I didn't know who I was going to work with or who I was going to organize with, but I was like, we need to help foster youth get these products. So I made this TikTok and it got like 17 million views. And I just like randomly said, can you guys just send me toilet paper and stuff for foster youth? And I got bombarded. Like when I say bombarded, we had a whole like 2 storage units full of just toiletries and tampons, pads, backpacks. Like my community online really showed up. So I was like, okay, now I have this stuff. Who do I give it to? So I researched some agencies in Seattle, and the one that really drew to my heart was Treehouse. They were still operating during the pandemic. I called them and they invited me down to their facility to kind of see. They already knew who I was from social media, so with that, they're like, "Oh yeah, Karlos, come on down." So I go down and I see that they have an amazing store. Like it's not just like what you think, because I know we're all used to like foster closets. Like everyone we are all used. No, this was like a store. Like it literally looks like a Ross or like a TJ Maxx, and everything, like even the way that they set it up, it looks like a store. Like you go shopping, and they have carts, and they say, this is our store, and kids and their families are allowed to go shopping. Everything is preferably new. That's one thing that I liked about them, that they do have things that are used, but preferably everything in that store is new, because they believe that children should, like foster youth, should get the newest things. So that's kind of how I got introduced to them. I was like, well, I have a storage unit full of stuff. So I just donated like 10,000 backpacks full of stuff. We had so many backpacks. And they had other organizations that they were already working with. So I was like, okay, cool. This was the answer to my question of how do I get this out to kids in need and families in need? So it worked out perfectly. And then 2 years after that, I just, I volunteered as much as I could. They were a smaller organization, so whenever I could stop in, I would go in and make videos. A couple days out of the month there, a couple months, I helped them. And a lot of people think that just giving money or backpacks to these organizations, those are helpful, but they need time. Like they need your physical body, right? And they're sorting things and organizing and keeping it looking so nice. That takes a lot of, and it's all volunteer based mostly. So yeah, I did that for like a year and a half. And then I had moved to Arizona and they invited me to do their champions luncheon. So that was really nice of them. And I did their champions luncheon for them. And yeah, it was really, really nice. I swung by there when I was in Seattle 2 weeks ago for the conference, the psychiatrist conference. And they're still doing great work. If you guys ever go to Seattle and you want to see an organization doing great work for foster youth, adoptive families. And one thing I love about Treehouse specifically is that they care for children up to 26. So in Washington State, foster care is, you can go into the extended foster care program, and they will help children up to 26. So they're helping with like, interview clothes. Another amazing thing about Treehouse specifically is that, let's say that you are 21 years old and you've been in the organization for 4 years. and you have a child, your child now qualifies for all of those benefits that you qualified for, even though your child is not in foster care. So I think that that is also an amazing piece of that organization, because that's a key way to stop, you know, the re-victimization of these youth and stop that generational trauma, right? Is offering resources up to 26, and not only up to 26, but then offering resources without court involvement for their children. It's so amazing.
Yeah, that is just beautiful. What a great job. Congratulations. So are you still have toilet paper? Or were you able to?
Oh no, we were completely we don't, and I did that once. I probably will never do it again, but I love helping organizations, right? So I'll use my platform and I'll say, hey, Bill, you have to give me your PO box so you can get bombarded with the stuff, because I can't take it all.
And speaking of platforms, so let's just back it up just a little bit. So when you were talking about TikTok and how many views, what happened? You had, I heard.
Oh, I made a video. It had to be in 2020, late 2020, early 2021. And it was because nobody had toilet paper. And we were all, it was like we were in the midst of, because COVID happened in that March 2020. So it was late 2020, early 2021, where we were just kind of like in a full year of COVID. And I made a video. Someone asked me a question about what are things that you would have needed as a foster youth during a pandemic. And I made a video about how foster youth are eternally in a pandemic. People wanted to see them because talk about it because we were all in this scenario. So in that video, I was talking about how, like, the lack of toilet paper, the lack of menstrual products, the lack of access that we were all experiencing. I said, that is how foster youth live every single day. So as a society, we kind of got like a glimpse of what it feels like to not have your basic necessities. And that's what that video was kind of talking about, like how we were all up in arms, like, oh my God, we can't go to the grocery store. Oh my God, there's no toilet paper. Oh my God, I'm like, well, these are things that kids don't have on a regular basis. These are things that kids don't have access to on a regular basis. And that video went super viral, and that really got people talking about the necessities that foster youth are often missing.
You know, there's so many opportunities and blessings that came out of COVID, you know, to your point. And I mean, I'm talking with you this evening because of COVID, because that's for most everybody here knows, but except for new attendees, but Adoption Happy Hour was born out of COVID, because we were having this big conference in Indianapolis and everybody was ready to come. And then COVID hit and we were like scrambling, like, how do we keep the community together? People are in the middle of a reunion or getting ready to start, and they were looking forward to coming to Indianapolis. What do we do? And we started out with a Zoom call and thought, well, we'll just hold the community together by talking about toilet paper and Lysol for a couple of Friday nights. Here we are 5 years later.
There you go.
So to your point, I mean, you never know what's going to happen.
Never know. Congratulations on 5 years. A lot of people don't understand how hard it is to keep like a show or a program like regularly. Like it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
For the first 2 years, we were here every Friday night for 2 years. And then we went to first and third. But yeah, this is our 5th season. So we just feel blessed. We just didn't think that we would find enough guests or there would be enough interest and people. And you guys still keep coming and we love you for it. So thank you. So yeah, I'm having this conversation with you because of COVID. So sweet. Yeah. Okay. So let's see. I did talk about the video that you just put out talking about adoption and about as far as it was an educational video. We posted that a lot. I would like for you to talk a little bit about that.
Which one?
Oh gosh. Okay. It's the one about you're talking to maybe a layperson that just wants to adopt and they're just all.
She froze, but it's the one where you talk about what your options are that don't erase somebody's identity. Kinship.
Okay. So that one, that's a pin video. That's an older video. Those are the alternatives to adoption. So that's pinned on my profile. I always keep that video pinned. I think that video is probably like 2 or 3 years old at this point. It's just up at the top of my page because it's something that people always asks. So I just pinned it there. So yeah, what are your questions about the alternatives? Do you
I
want?
just thought you would want to share that with those that maybe hadn't seen it.
Yeah, so a lot.
Because here we are in November and it's NAM and, you know,
So I would like to address this. One, a lot of people, especially on the social media side of things, they have this idea, and maybe because when TikTok first started, there was a group of adoptees like myself who were all speaking out, right? And we each had our own different ideas of how to fix the system or how to correct the system. And then some of us had different intersectional experiences where, I was a foster youth and adoptee, also a gay and Black man. And then there were international adoptees who were Caucasian. So they didn't have the same experience of being homosexual or Black, but we still shared adoption experiences. So I think the main reason why I made that video is because a lot of people think, specifically with my content, I will only speak for myself. A lot of people have this idea of the quote abolish adoptee community, and that people want to abolish adoption. Now, there are some people who just straight out want to abolish adoption. But I never been an abolish person. I've always been, let's look at different ways to care for children. So that's where that video came, because I do believe that if a child has informed consent, and I'm meaning a child by the ages of 16 to 26, if they have informed consent and they want to get adopted, I think that should be their choice. I do disagree with people adopting children without consent, because it does change the legal backgrounds, the birth certificates, their name, and then there are things later on in life that we don't even think about, right? So even if you had the most fantastic adopted family, and you did reunite, and if you had fantastic adoptive families, and if it was safe and possible, you should be in communication and reunification with your birth family. So if you had great parents who are child-centered and trauma-informed, wouldn't they want you to be able to bury your birth family that they've made sure that you've been in contact with your whole life, right? You can't do that. Like, even if you have parents who truly were there supporting you, there are legalities to adoption that people don't realize that affect you forever, right? So that's where I made this list of alternatives. A lot of people were trying to think that I made this list of options because I was trying to say, don't adopt because kids don't need care. No, there are tons of kids that need a lot of care, but there are lifelong term effects to legal adoption. So the alternatives, I think there's 7 legal alternatives depending on your state. The first one is clearly, keeping a family together if safe and possible, offering resources. And, that seems to be a given solution, but you would be surprised how many people just, when you say, okay, there's an issue, what's step one? They're like, take them out. No, unless they're in immediate danger. Let's see if we can offer these parents some education and resources. Okay. Are they immediate danger? No. Okay. So the parent just is like having the baby sleep in the kitchen, and a family of 7. I don't know if you guys have seen that story with the family on TikTok. They're not adoption, but it's just like this family called the Jenkins. They're going viral on TikTok for being a family of 7 living in a 1-bedroom apartment. And everyone was like, call CPS. And I was like, first of all, you're not going to be able to keep 5 siblings together. So let's not call CPS right now. But we can give this family some resources so they can understand why that could be seen as neglectful. And let's also offer them some parental education. So first step, keeping families together is safe and possible. If that's not safe or possible, the second step would be kinship care. That's family, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandma, older sibling. We're all familiar with kinship care. Second, the third would be fictive kinship. So fictive kinship is a neighbor, someone from church, someone from school, someone that knows the family and their family traditions, but is not blood related to the family, right? Then you have guardianship. And guardianship everyone's usually familiar with guardianship. A lot of people confuse guardianship with adoption, and they're very similar, especially looking at different states. They can be almost identical. You can take the child to the doctor. You can go to get their passport. You can go on vacations with them. And it also depends, guardianship. And now that I'm further on in my work, there are 2 types of guardianship, right? So, and there's 2 types of kinship. We're talking in-state, in-system, or out-of-system, right? So an out-of-system guardianship, which is called a custody transfer. Anyone can do a custody transfer. You literally can go get notarized at a bank with a notarist or with an attorney and do a custody transfer. That is an out-of-the-system guardianship. In-a-system guardianship usually pertains to a state or court system placing a child with a guardian. So, but guardianship is still guardianship. It's just in system, out of system, depending on what is the best need for the child. The same thing applies for kinships. And after guardianship, there's this thing called conservatorship. Conservatorship really doesn't really apply in most of America except for Texas. Texas does not have any guardianship options. So you cannot just be a guardian in Texas. You either have to be an adoptive parent or the birth parent, or you have to have a conservatorship. The most familiar thing I can remind you guys of what a conservatorship is what happened to Britney Spears. The negative about conservatorships, though, is that they're different than guardianships. Guardianships automatically end at 18. Conservatorships do not. Conservatorships, especially if they're placed by the courts, can exist your whole life. And we've seen some negative outcomes like Britney Spears' case, where she literally had to take her own parents to court to say, like, leave me alone. I don't want you controlling my whole life anymore. And then after that is, adoption with consent. So those are all the alternatives.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. I just thought that was interesting, being that it's November, and I love the way you articulated that and shared that. So I thought it was great for you to share this evening. I personally have guardianship of my granddaughter, and she's 18 today.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's over now.
It's over now. So yeah, I have a little birthday. But yeah, this is my granddaughter. She's been in my life since she was 2. This is from my surrender daughter, and they had talked about. My daughter talked about putting her up for adoption. So yeah, I've had guardianship since then. So yes, okay. I'm starting to get some questions in. I mean, normally we open at about 8, but I did want to go ahead and ask you, what advice would you give the LGBTQIA community about family building options beyond infant adoption?
The same advice that I gave myself. If you want your own child, use your own organs. Just because you're queer does not mean that you are any less or more qualified or guaranteed to have children. Children are a privilege. They are not a right. As a gay man myself, if I want to have kids, I call it splatter batter on TikTok because we can't use the word semen, but my semen works. So if I want a child, I would either have to find a human being that has ovaries and do it naturally. I would find a surrogate. I also don't agree with surrogacy, but that's a whole nother conversation. But ultimately, what my answer would be is try to look at alternatives that don't include a traditional family style, right? So if you truly do want a child as a queer person, buying another person's baby is not the answer. It's not going to make you a parent. And people hate when I tell them this. People who truly want to be a parent, adoption does not make you a parent. It makes you an adoptive parent. It's a difference between having your own children and having children that you love and care for, that you will treat the same, but they won't ever be your children because there's going to be traumas connected. There's going to be genetics, traits that, that you may not like, or that you may not have for yourself or see for your children, right? So my answer would for the queer community, if they want kids, use your own splatter batter, right? Make sure and truly find another queer couple. I don't see the problem with if you're a gay couple and you have a lesbian couple, y'all both want kids. Look, you got 4 sets of parents. We got 2 sets of parents. We got 4 adults in the house. Look, it takes a village. Isn't that what they say? Right. But what I do see often, especially on social media, that a lot of queer people, they try to form a traditional family. And what they do is they prey on poor and impoverished people and children, and they adopt. And most of them, I hate to say it, yes, I think it's wrong for these agencies and Christian agencies to keep gay people from adopting. But why would you go out of your way to fight a system that already excludes you from doing something as basic as caring for a child, right? So if Catholic Social Services says, oh, you can't adopt through our foster care system because you're queer, why do you think it would be okay to spend $50,000 to pay a baby broker to find you a baby? It doesn't make sense to me. So yeah, my answer would be form non-traditional families. And if you truly want to open up your home, there are 435,000 children in the foster care system, and most state agencies who are run by the state, they don't care if you're queer or not. They just want to make sure that you can pass a background check and a home study. And at this moment, some states are doing virtual home studies. So really, like, the standards are in hell when it comes to being qualified. So just go try to get qualified. Excuse my French, y'all. It's happy hour, so.
That's right. It's happy hour. So to piggyback a little bit off of that, where do you stand on birth certificates?
I think that if you change a birth certificate, that is falsifying a legal document. I do believe that the United States will see a huge backlash in the next 20 to 50 years of lawsuits from adoptees like myself, who've gone through emotional and legal trauma that was unnecessary. My mom and my sister, these are my birth family, they died in a tragic car accident. My mom's body was decapitated. I knew who she was. I identified her body with my brother. I was told I could not sign off on that identification because she was not on my birth certificate. I believe that it's a certificate of birth. Unless I went back into somebody's vagina and went and ungrew, then there's no way that I did not come from this person, right? There's no way. Like, I look at my birth certificate now, and also we have to look at a racial aspect of this, right? So, and on my birth certificate specifically, and other transracial birth certificates, we have white people as our owners, as the people who birthed us. And there is so much connection from slavery there, right? I have this phrase on my page, adoption is slavery. And people always say, what, adoption can't be slavery? And I say, well, tell me some differences, right? Tell me another system that allows you to buy a human being, change their birth certificate, change their name, change their identity, change their culture and religion, do this without their consent, and do it forever. What other process works like that? Slavery, but we see it as adoption because it's, quote, beautiful.
Yes, that's correct. We do. Yeah, I was just wondering, in the queer community, what they foresee the birth certificate. How do they want it? What do you hear?
Well, so we see some states like New York State and Washington State specifically, also Canada does this, where they have 4 parents. They'll have multiple parents on the birth certificate, which, I think that's a step in the right direction. If we have like a set of queer parents adopting a child, they will have the birth mother on there and then the set of queer parents, right, on the birth certificate as well. But I also, even though I'm queer, I'm also still scientifically minded. So 4 people can't give birth to 1 person, that's just not true. I think that we should never touch birth certificates. You get an adoption certificate.
Adoption certificate.
A birth certificate. And even if you don't like the parents, like, I don't much like my father, but guess what? That's still my father, right? That's still my dad. And it's important not to mix these records, because in 60 to 100 years, and our children are looking through their ancestry, they're going to have a hell of a time, right? If I do have kids, they're going to have a hell of a time trying to figure out what happened with Grandpa Karlos, and why does he have these white people on the birth certificate?
Yeah. Okay. Next question. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Are you familiar with baby boxes, and how do you feel about them?
So I've spoken out about baby boxes. Monica, I forget her last name, the owner, because I want to remind you guys, this is not a nonprofit. My Baby Boxes is a for-profit business. They may have a nonprofit sector, but they are Monica Kelsey. Yes, she and I don't like each other. And the reason why we don't like each other is because I told her that they are not baby boxes. I called them what they are. And someone said in the comments, they said, I love your well-articulated honesty, because that's what I do. I'm not going to be mean, but I don't sugarcoat shit, right? So I told Monica, I said, you call it a baby box, I call it a get out of jail free card box. And she goes, well, why do you call it a get out of jail free card? I said, well, if I have a bunch of girls locked in a basement and one of them gets pregnant, all I have to do is put the baby in your box. If I have incestuous acts with a child and my child has a baby, all I have to do is put it in your box, because the whole branding of this box is drop off the baby safe and you don't have to give any information or identification. So if I don't have to give you any information or identification, how do we know these babies are coming from safe, stable? Well, clearly they're not coming from safe, stable places, but how do we know they're not coming from a darker place, right? And how do we know we're not aiding human trafficking? How do we know that these aren't victims of human trafficking? How do we know that the mothers of these children, and this is really what gets me, because anyone can drop off babies at these boxes. So a lot of the times I'll see videos of men dropping off babies to these boxes, right? Where's the mom? How do we know that was her choice? Right? And then also I like to look at every, you guys follow me on social media. The number one thing I always say is follow the money. Follow the money. Now, I'm not going to say these boxes don't have a place. They do, but the money is outrageous. The amount of our tax dollars that go into making these boxes, they're about $144,000 for each box, right? Plus the training that Monica requires that you can only get through her organization, right? So she goes to fire departments, usually fire departments, gets these boxes in place for like $177,000, and they're only used maybe once to twice every 5 to 10 years. They're not utilized as much. Also, they answered a problem that we did not have an issue with. There have been safe places since the early 80s. You could drop off a baby less than 6 months at firehouses, libraries, 7-Elevens, hell, the public bus, anywhere that you see the yellow sign that says a safe place, you can drop off a baby there, right? Safely, no questions asked. That's already been a law. So why did we have to make a box? I just think and then the idea, so on the flip side of that also, the idea of dropping off a child and not requiring any background information is asinine to me. We want to talk about medical history missing, want to talk about family history missing. This child has no information. So, like I said, I think it has a place for like small towns, like I think like small towns, like where they don't have as many access to resources, possibly. But if you look at where they're placing these boxes, also, if you go to the safe haven box locations, it's very convenient that they're in lower impoverished Blacker communities is where she places them. They're not in very high-end communities. They're not in white communities. So so we kind of know what that means, right?
Yeah, and they're making the assumption that without these, that these babies are all going to get dumped.
And yes, and somebody in the
That's
conversation,
the argument.
she managed to circumvent the child welfare system in some states. Yes, she's not a child welfare agent. This is not a child welfare agency. This is a private organization that it blows my mind because yes, yeah, you put the baby in the box, the fire department will take the baby, but they don't call CPS. You know who they call? A private adoption agency. Because if they called CPS would, we all know this, the number one thing that CPS is going to try to do is reunite the family. Who is this baby? Can we find out who the baby's parents are? Adoption agencies, they're going to put an ad out in the newspaper or on the radio and say, hey, anybody need baby Joe? Anybody know baby John, baby Joe? You don't? All right, up for adoption they go, and they can make anywhere between $60,000 and $100,000. There you go. Cha-ching.
Yeah, Jen and Beth, I think you can jump in here anytime on the baby boxes because I know you have a lot more information there too.
And our other board member, Ann, is on. Yeah, Beth and I live just down the road from Monica Kelsey. So I am the one that has bit my tongue, but Beth and Ann have gone after her online and they are blocked on everything. Even Beth's author's page is blocked. But Beth has gone to baby box blessings. We've talked to people involved in patents. I mean, we know that this medical box is a modified feed trough. She lives in a rural town outside of Fort Wayne, Woodburn. Her husband's the mayor. There is a company that makes feeding troughs there that made the first one for her, and they continue to make them. I mean, it is disgusting for us around here. There's billboards on our interstate about, you can dump your baby off, and I don't know.
So did you guys also know, since you know them directly, there's some controversy that one of my team members found. You guys ever be on when you're scrolling TikTok and the game ads will come up? There's a game that's specifically made that's like choose, it's like an adoption game. So you choose to be
Mhm.
homeless and poor, or you can choose to drop the baby off. There's a scene that one of my teammates gave me, and Laura, if you have the screenshot, put it in the chat here, in the Zoom chat. It literally has Monica's real phone number from the baby box in the game.
Mhm.
And we called her out on it. And then she lied and she goes, we didn't even know that they were using this game. We didn't even know they were using our company's, identity. And then we started doing some research. Yes, she did, because months before they even made that ad, she had already like wrote on one of her Facebook and Instagram things like, it's so cool that a video game. Oh yeah, Laura just put it. Laura, you can put it in the Zoom meeting. It's so cool that a video game is implementing our business, right? So then when we brought attention to it, lo and behold, the game changed the number to a fake number that wasn't attached to, and this is a game that's promoted towards children, right? This is a game that's promoted to literal children. So it is absolutely asinine. I'm going to drag it. I don't know if I can put it in the chat here. I'm going to try to drag it over.
You can screen share too. And the other thing, I mean, Beth is really good at investigating this stuff, and we have a private Facebook chat thing where we're always discussing her and she's doing this and she's doing that. But one of the grossest things that we found, and Beth and I actually talked to some legislators about it, she has, and you can find them, they're easy to find. She has PSAs. So in these PSAs, her goal with these is to start playing these in the middle school and eventually, and well, middle school, high school, and eventually get them down to the elementary school level. Um, and this is where children in foster care could definitely fall trap to this. But what she's showing in this is a very affluent white girl and her friends. You see them running around with their little boyfriends. Next thing you know, this teenage girl is pregnant and she hides the pregnancy. She gets no medical care. Her girlfriend helps her deliver, and they drive her with her and the baby. Her girlfriend drives her to a box, and her girlfriend takes the baby and puts it in the box. And she is teaching these young girls to keep their pregnancies a secret. And this is how you get rid of an unwanted pregnancy.
It's gross.
It's the whole thing's just gross. I mean, Beth and Ann might have more to say about it, but yeah, we battle her all the time.
Yeah, just gross. The game
Gossip
is
Harbor.
called
Yes,
Gossip
thank you.
Harbor. Put it in the chat. It's called Gossip Harbor.
Okay, we're right at 8 o'clock. And Carlos, what we normally do at this point is we'd like to open up questions from our attendees. So anyone that has a question for Carlos, if you would please go ahead and raise your virtual hand. See, here we go. And Susan, you want to take your